Welcome to the deep dive. The world today feels like it's just constantly changing, right?
Yeah.
Especially the job market.
Yeah.
And we're just flooded with news, analyses. It's really hard to cut through all that noise and figure out what's actually going on. So that's exactly why we're here today. Our mission is to do a real deep dive into the source material you've shared with us. We're focusing on these recent and, frankly, pretty surprising shifts in the tech job world, particularly for programmers.
Yeah, and surprising is definitely the word. This landscape, it's caught a lot of people off guard. I mean, especially when you think about how fast technology has been moving forward.
Right.
So what's really interesting about this deep dive, I think, is we're not just looking at the headlines, the numbers,
Yeah.
but also trying to understand some of the deeper underlying forces, things that are really shaping this big shift in tech jobs.
Absolutely. And when we say surprising, well, you're going to hear some numbers that really hammer home the scale of this disruption. Plus, some really nuanced discussions from the sources about why this is happening. We're talking AI, we're talking global economic shifts. It's a lot. We'll unpack specific examples, even like individual stories that came directly from the sources you sent over. So let's just get right into it.
Okay, so first off, what immediately jumps out from our source material is just the sheer scale of these layoffs. We're looking at, what, over 100,000 programmers laid off in the last year alone?
Yeah, at least. And some estimates push that number even higher, maybe closer to 150,000 if you also count the big players in gaming and visual effects.
Wow.
And it's a stark picture, really. Our material shows these aren't just like small tweaks. The cuts are hitting major tech giants. Think Google, Meta, HP, Salesforce, Klarna, Intel, Microsoft, Amazon. The list goes on.
And it's not just core tech either. Like you mentioned, gaming's been hit hard. Unity, PlayStation Europe, Sony, Ubisoft, Rocksteady, big names.
Mm.
Plus reports of around 50 smaller game studios just gone, shut down entirely.
Goodness.
Even in VFX, visual effects, companies like Technicolor announced big restructuring cuts. And the sources also mentioned upcoming, potentially significant cuts at NetEase. They're apparently looking to close all their game studios outside of China.
So this really makes you wonder, what is the new normal here? Because you see conflicting things in the sources, right? Some suggest, okay, maybe the demand for programmers peaked a few years back and we're just kind of finding an equilibrium now.
Hmm.
But then just as strongly, other voices in the material are arguing, no, jobs aren't resetting, they're disappearing fast. They're saying none of this feels normal at all. How do we, square those two views?
That's a really key tension in the data we have. If you try to synthesize the main reasons companies are giving for these layoffs, it kind of boils down to three things based on the sources. One is pretty straightforward, cost cutting, aggressive cost cutting. Two is major corporate restructuring. And three, a really noticeable shift towards automation, heavily influenced by, well, AI.
Okay, yeah, you mentioned AI. Let's dig into that a bit because, there's a lot of talk, maybe some hopium, as one source put it, that AI is just going to replace software engineers entirely. Do the sources actually back that up with examples, or is it more nuanced? Like, what can AI really do right now versus a human?
It's definitely more nuanced based on what we're seeing. I mean, what's compelling is how the sources handle this. Yes, an AI tool like Microsoft's Copilot can generate code incredibly fast. Like there's an example of it writing a C program in Zulu in, 3 seconds?
Wow.
But, and this is the crucial but, that code almost always needs a human to check it, verify it, often refactor it quite a bit before it's actually useful in production. So the consensus across multiple sources seems to be that AI is, quote, far from able to replace tech workers wholesale.
Okay.
In fact, some argue it's actually turning into an arms race where companies are trying to hire and keep people who know how to use AI effectively.
Yeah.
Google says 25% of its code is AI generated now, but there's that important caveat someone raised. Prompting AI to generate code is different from prompting AI to generate useful code. It feels more like augmentation right now, not outright replacement.
Okay, that makes sense. But AI isn't the only driver here, right? The sources point to something else, maybe even more strategic, this offshoring trend. Some sources suggest this isn't just about correcting for overhiring. It's maybe a deliberate long-term strategy, kind of like what happened with manufacturing years ago.
Exactly. That comes through quite strongly. The trend detailed in the sources shows a really significant shift of jobs towards India and also Latin America. Specifically, Mexico, Brazil, especially for English-speaking roles, and Argentina get mentioned. And the rationale reported for companies doing this, it's pretty blunt. They can apparently find offshore talent with 15 years of experience for the cost of a U.S. college grad.
1/3. Wow.
Yeah. And maybe just as importantly, the sources mentioned they can terminate these offshore contracts very easily, sometimes with just one email to the U.S. agency managing the contract.
Yep.
Much lower friction, lower severance costs. There's even a concrete example cited: American Airlines apparently offshoring its entire IT organization to India. So yeah, this looks less like a temporary adjustment and more like a fundamental shift in where the work gets done.
Right. And then on top of that, you have the whole narrative about companies overhiring during a pandemic, right? Sources suggest that back in 2020, 2021, with everyone online and, as one source put it, free money flowing, companies just hired like crazy. And now the idea is they're cutting back, starting with the flex workforce, contractors, before their internal employees.
Which does raise that question you hinted at. Is it just correcting for hiring too many people? Or is there something deeper? And this is where several sources bring up what they call capital greed. They really highlight this perspective that companies are cutting jobs despite making record profits.
Right. That's a point that comes up a lot.
Yeah, generating more money than ever in some cases, but still cutting staff. The argument is that this kind of greed is not new, and it's maybe driven by things like CEO bonuses, shareholder pressure, maybe even tax policies that kind of encourage shifting profits over investing in people. And it's worth noting, the sources have different takes on who is getting laid off. Is it underperformers? Or is it just good, capable people caught in a corporate strategy focused purely on maximizing shareholder value? The insight here isn't just about a downturn. It's about this potential shift where companies prioritize shareholder value above almost everything else, even if it means shedding domestic talent while profits are soaring.
So,
Okay, all these forces, AI, offshoring, profit motives, what does this actually mean for the individuals, the programmers who are actually caught in the middle of this huge shift? It sounds like it's creating some really profound challenges, just on a human level.
oh, definitely. The human toll comes through really clearly. One of the biggest things highlighted is the issue of job gaps, being unemployed for a while. In the tech world, particularly software engineering, or SWE land as one source called it, a gap on your resume can be seen almost like a death sentence. It makes employers view you as a risk.
Yeah, I can see that.
And there are some tough examples in the sources. Like, a senior software engineer from Amex Technologies had a 1.5-year gap, finally found a low-paying job, and then got laid off again just a few months later.
Oh, man.
Or the story of someone over 50 with 25 years of solid experience who applied to over 4,000 jobs in 14 months.
4,000.
Yeah. And didn't get a single callback or interview. Not one. For some people, the data suggests the door just feels completely shut right now. That's incredibly rough. And then you layer on the issues around ageism, maybe, and the whole interview process itself. Sources talk a lot about frustration with leak code bullshit, those abstract coding puzzles, and this feeling that interviews don't actually test what you do day to day. And sometimes they're run by, quote, young managers know-it-alls who are just looking for some mythical, perfect unicorn candidate. Plus, just getting your resume seen past the AI filters that everyone uses now sounds like a whole challenge in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. So, given all those obstacles, it's no surprise people might start looking elsewhere, right? For different kinds of work. The sources actually discuss several alternative careers. But, well, for things like trades or physical labor, the feedback is pretty negative.
Oh, really? How so?
People talk about the physical toll. Hanging drywall, mixing or moving concrete, experiencing aches in places in my back they never had before, working in tough conditions like 100-degree weather. And the pay, significantly lower, sometimes down to like 30% of what they made in tech. The sources really emphasize that while these jobs are essential, they're often underfunded, undervalued by society. It's this paradox where the most needed jobs can be the hardest and worst paid.
Wow. Okay, so physical labor sounds like a really tough transition. What about other fields that the world needs, like, say, teaching or nursing? Are the prospects any better there, according to the sources?
Well, the need is definitely there, but the sources point out persistent problems in those sectors too. Often it's low pay again. And particularly for nurses and teachers, people mention horrible work conditions. Plus, you see similar dynamics to tech, like offshoring and downward pressure on wages. An example given was senior 3D artists for a major game like Cyberpunk 2077 reportedly making only $18 an hour if they were based in the Philippines.
$18 an hour for senior artists.
Yeah, or UK university teachers, even with PhDs, hitting a salary ceiling around £60,000 a year. And for nursing, the sources mention a huge influx of internationally certified nurses coming from places like India, Kenya, the Philippines, which also impacts the domestic market. It all kind of ties back to this really poignant idea someone expressed. Necessitous people are not free to pursue their passions as they are too busy focusing on survival.
Yeah, that's a powerful thought. So, okay, faced with all this, the tough tech market, the challenging alternatives, what practical advice do the sources actually offer? Are there any strategies people can use to navigate this?
There are a few strategies that come up. One is basically hunkering down. Try to position yourself financially to comfortably get by for a few years. Use that time to really ramp up interview training. Maybe focus on those lead code skills even if you hate them. And then, when the market improves or you get an offer, be prepared to mercilessly job hop for the highest salary to make up lost ground. Another interesting piece of advice was using side projects, maybe even setting up a small LLC to fill those resume gaps. That way you can present yourself as a consultant, showing you've been active and engaged, even if you weren't traditionally employed.
That's clever. And it sounds like people are finding other ways to cope too, non-career things like someone mentioned going to the gym just to feel some sense of control.
Exactly. Finding routine and control where you can. But all of this, it really raises a bigger question, doesn't it? What are the long-term consequences of these shifts?
Yeah.
Not just for individual careers, which are obviously hugely impacted, but for, say, national capabilities.
Yeah.
There's a real concern voiced in the sources that consistently sending tech jobs overseas could lead to an erosion of technological programming skills domestically, say, in the U.S. That could impact everything from future innovation to national security, even global competitiveness down the line.
Yeah, that's a serious point. And, it's probably worth acknowledging here that some of the source material definitely touches on politically charged topics, things like H-1B, L-1 visas, different tax policies, economic strategies. And just to be clear, as always in these deep dives, our aim isn't to endorse any particular viewpoint from the sources, but just to report impartially on what's being discussed. We saw different opinions on things like alleged visa loopholes, even suggestions about charging companies millions for each H-1B visa to try and influence the labor market. Lots of strong views in there.
Right. So I think what we've really seen from digging into all this material is that the current tech job situation, it's much more complex than just a standard economic downturn.
Yeah.
Really feels like a convergence of factors. Rapid AI integration, yes, but also very deliberate global labor arbitrage. And shifting corporate strategies focus heavily on maximizing profits. All these things are profoundly reshaping what it even means to have a career in technology today.
So you've heard the numbers, you've heard some of the really challenging personal experiences, and we've explored these complex forces, AI, offshoring, profit motives that are all tangled up together. This really isn't just a story about the tech industry. It feels like a much bigger story about the changing nature of work itself in the 21st century. And maybe the final thought to leave you with is this. If companies continue down this path, prioritizing short-term profits through extensive offshoring and AI automation, often without making parallel, sustained investments in their domestic workforce, what might be the ultimate cost? Not just to innovation or the middle class, but to the overall technological self-sufficiency and strength of entire nations in the decades ahead. Something to think about.